Welcome back, guys. This is the third generation Subaru Crosstrek, but more specifically, it's a 24 Crosstrek Wilderness, and I have 7 major gripes or concerns that I really need to share with you guys. If you're looking for a full review of it, you can find one of those on my channel. I did that last summer, but if you own one of these, you probably to some extent feel the same way that I do, or if you're looking to purchase one, you need to be aware of what you're getting into. Keep in mind that overall, these and other Subarus in general are incredible vehicles, and they're one of the best values on the market. But still, they're not perfect, hence my need to make this video. But if you're new here, I've actually owned an Outback Wilderness for over 2 years, and I used to own a 2nd gen Crosstrek Premium with the 2-liter Boxer for a few years as well. In addition, I've also driven dozens of Crosstreks across my channel, which huge thanks to Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow this one for the day. It's about $1,000 under MSRP, I'll link it below if you're interested. And otherwise, I don't want to hate on anyone's car, I'm just sharing my experiences as well as what I've read on the forums and what you guys tell me in my videos that you don't like about the Crosstrek Wilderness. So with that said, let's dive right into my 7 gripes. Let's start with the biggest issue for number 1, and that's the fact that this has a CVT. But in my experience, it's actually a pretty good CVT. It's a lot better than a lot of the other competitors. But just because I haven't had any problems in my 80,000 miles of ownership doesn't mean that other people don't. And the fact is, when these do fail outside of warranty, for whatever reason, they cost $8,000 to $11,000 to replace. And I don't feel like you should feel forced to buy an extended warranty on your brand new vehicle just because this automatic transmission costs about twice as much to replace or more than the average automatic transmission. But it is comforting to know that these are the same transmission basically that's in the big heavy Subaru Ascent that weighs over 1,000 pounds more than this, has a much higher towing capacity, and a more powerful engine. So if it can be durable and last in the Ascent, then I think for the average person, this will probably work out pretty well in their Crosstrek. And while I have the hood open, you should notice that it does look really nice, clean, and spotless under the hood like you'd expect on your brand new vehicle. But there isn't any weather stripping or rubber lining around the hood or around the periphery of the fenders, anything like that, like a lot of other manufacturers have. So even on my own Outback Wilderness, which doesn't really drive more than dirt trails like this, it's absolutely disgusting under the hood, and it doesn't even have 40,000 miles. Meanwhile, in the last couple weeks, I drove a Toyota Tacoma with almost 250,000 miles. It does have a better design and weather stripping, and it looks spotless under the hood, much cleaner than my Subaru has in a long time. And I really wish that Subaru wouldn't save the $5 it takes to add that lining. So if you are going to buy one of these, maybe consider adding that when it's brand new and when it's clean and shiny. My second issue is the auto start stop system is not very well integrated into this system, and when it does work, it's not very smooth. Boxer engines have been around for a long time. Auto start stop is obviously a newer technology, more mandated by the EPA to help with fuel economy, but it doesn't work very well. And I don't know that saving a few cents per drive when the vehicle does shut off is worth the wear and tear that you get. And when it does work, it usually doesn't stay off for more than about 30 seconds before it has to kick on to sustain the energy needed to power the rest of the vehicle. Especially when HVAC is being used, sometimes it cuts off as early as 14 seconds. So I'm going to show you a little bit of footage I filmed earlier with that issue. Auto start stop really isn't very well suited to this vehicle. Right now I have HVAC off, and let's see if the system works when there isn't much of an electrical load. Hasn't worked. Let me move a few feet forward. Try one more time. Foot all the way to the firewall. Still isn't working. Maybe it doesn't have enough battery juice to feel like it can safely operate that. Let me try turning that on. That would only make it less likely to work. Foot all the way down, suppressed. Yeah, it just does not work very well, very consistently. So right now driving, you can see I have the heat on. Let's get to a stop. The engine shut off. And let's see how much fuel we save and how long it takes before it has to start back on to maintain the heat with the HVAC. Insert elevator music here. What was that, about 15 seconds? So it's kind of abrupt when it shakes to wake you up, but at least it lets you know it's time to get going again. My third issue is the lane keep assist can sometimes be overcorrective and aggressive. It can even bounce you out of your lane. That combined with the sensitive steering ratio, just in general, especially at higher speeds, and it can sometimes be a concern. Of course, this car and most, you know, they're not perfectly balanced. It's not a hands-free system. It's not a Tesla, which those are also not hand-free systems. but just be careful when you are driving it. Thankfully, the new Crosstrek does have the 4th generation of eyesight system, which is the triple camera. And even in my driving it out here today, it does feel better suited than the 3rd gen system that's on my Outback Wilderness. But still be careful. Don't take your hands off the road and expect the unexpectable. The 4th issue is miles per gallon. So although the Crosstreks have a pretty impressive for their size 16.6 gallon tank, which is actually about 4 gallons bigger than say a Mazda CX-30, it still doesn't get the best gas mileage in general, especially the Crosstrek Wilderness equivalent. I will say though, when I used to have my 2-liter premium, which was gutless, it didn't have any power, and I often got in the low 30s in that, and my best tank ever going, you know, a scenic highway route about 55 miles an hour, it actually got up to 44 miles on the whole gallon trip. But this one, with the 182 horsepower Crosstrek engine, it only gets 25 city, 29 highway, and that's EPA ratings. In reality, you might get a little bit lower than that, especially what people have told me on the forums. Obviously, the all-terrain tires, which are really good and hold up for a long time, and the more aggressive final drive ratio are going to contribute to that. But still, that's just not very good gas mileage for a sub 200 horsepower 4-cylinder car, even despite its capability. The Boxer and CVT combo do seem to be pretty good, pretty economical, but it's fairly sensitive in what makes it economical. The oil temp needs to be close to 200 degrees. Don't overfill the gas tank, as that can overflow and mess with the charcoal canister and confuse the emission sensors that are in there. And then the CVT needs to be in a high simulated gear, and it doesn't often want to stay in the 8th simulated gear because of the lack of power to sustain that RPM. But you do really well at low highway speeds. The faster you go though, the more fuel is needed to fight the air and rolling resistance, and my best miles per gallon on average in a Subaru is between about 55 and 65 miles per hour. If you're just driving short distances, do not expect to get the EPA ratings on this one. My 5th issue is the infotainment screen is really pretty bad. Like a lot of automakers, they don't really have a very good infotainment screen, so the ones that do have Android Auto, Apple CarPlay, such as this, it works way better than the options that you'd otherwise have. Even when you pay for navigation, that's kind of a waste, other than the fact that you can use navigation when you're out of cell service, so if you really are going to get out in the middle of nowhere, that could be valuable. But also, you're going to pay probably at least 3 times as much for this navigation than you would just buy your own portable GPS, which will last longer, and you can update more easily. But I don't think this is a very good system or a very safe system. And what I mean is all these buttons are so small. To get into your heated seats on the Crosstrek, you do have the physical buttons down here. But the other more high-end Subaru models, you have to fiddle around with these. Thankfully, it's a little bit less cumbersome than the 2022 like what mine has. But even some of these buttons, they're so small, it's easy to literally miss them half the time. Or they're slow to respond. There's a few ways to access some of the things, but in general, it's not very good. And then the backup camera only takes up a fraction of the screen, which we'll talk more about that in a second. But other vertical screens, such as what the Dodge Rams have, way better, way higher end, and more responsive. But a more useful screen is a horizontal screen that's more natural with how a lot of us are starting to use our phones and watching television and things like that. But either way, I really wish that Subaru would make a better screen that was more touch sensitive, more responsive, and had better proportioned icons, because I don't need a huge settings button here, but the smallest auto start stop button in the world that I miss it half the time. So then the next issue is the backup camera. It only takes up a portion of the screen because of the vertical layout, and it's really grainy. And let me close the sunroof, you can see the difference. But it reflects a lot. There's so much glare and reflection on this screen. I feel like maybe if it was angled slightly more towards the driver, that would help out. Or if they put, you know, a protective anti-glare screen covering or spray or something on it. But it's just not very good. The trajectory lines do move. But for being the Crosstrek Wilderness, even after a $1,000 discount like this one is graciously offered at, it's still, for 36 grand, being a Subaru Wilderness model, it's the worst Wilderness. It doesn't have a front-facing camera. Heck, for the whole 3rd generation Crosstrek, Subaru couldn't even go through the effort of redesigning and eliminating their CD tray because these no longer have a CD player. Yet they didn't even do that. They basically gave you the same transmission tunnel covering that you got on the 2nd generation. And I'm sure the lack of quality for the backup camera is partially due to the pixelation and what the screen is set for. But also, it could be the camera in general. Whatever it is, I'm just not overly impressed with this when I've driven a lot of other mid-$30,000 vehicles that do have a much higher end screen that you can actually see more of what's going on. Heck, some cars at this price point even have the 360-degree camera. And that's a really neat feature. You'd think an off-road vehicle might want to have that. And lastly, my 7th issue with this is there are not very many customizable options from the factory, although this does look really good, and you can get a decent amount of aftermarket support, and it seems like every year there's more and more being offered. Just check out this example that I found on the lot while coming into town to borrow this one. Pretty cool, huh? But after having driven a manual Crosstrek, although the shifter, the feeling was pretty numb, it was still the most fun Crosstrek that I've ever driven. And you know, if these were offered with maybe the 2.4 liter turbo or the NA 2.4 from the BRZ, maybe the manual transmission from the BRZ or the WRX, I think a lot more people would buy these, especially to avoid the CVT, which is the first concern. Come on, Subaru, other manufacturers are offering turbo, more powerful engines, and they're smaller models, especially when these are all, you know, the same global platform. It really wouldn't take that much to stick a different engine in here. But Hyundai or Mazda, like the CX-30 Turbo, there's a lot of competition to this that actually has high output engines, sometimes up to about 100 horsepower more than this one. But they're all on the same Subaru architect. Maybe in a few years Subaru will offer a turbo model, but so far they haven't. Anyways, guys, that's my list of gripes. I don't mean to hate on this, so comment your thoughts and opinions and what your gripes are with your Subaru, or if you're considering one of these, what are the things that are maybe turning you away from it? As well as if you are considering one or you are an owner, what are the things you love about it? So let's definitely end on a high note. But if you got any value out of this video, especially if you're someone who has not yet bought a Subaru, but you're wondering from owners, what do we like? What don't we like? That's a pretty inclusive list. I know some of you guys are gonna fight and argue in the comments, but in general, a lot of people have that sort of mindset towards the downfalls of the Crosstrek. Overall, it's an incredible off-roader or a soft roader. It's not going to compete with a Wrangler or a Foreigner, but it's going to be a lot more capable than the average economy car. So with that said, if you guys like this video, please consider liking this video. Comment, again, thoughts and opinions below. I read all of them. And subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I wish you guys the best. Until next time, take care.